requested revisions, comments on the minutes?
I was wondering if maybe we might put those off for review till the next session. Is that,
Do you feel you need that?
I think I haven't really had a chance to look them over. We only just got them.
Okay,
Is that an option that we could do, Kathy?
yes.
But review the minutes?
I ask all of you to speak up.
Okay,
Or sit closer to the mic.
yeah. Is it possible for us to review the minutes at the next meeting and approve them then? Okay.
Okay. It is so ordered. We'll lay those aside and then put those on our agenda for the meeting in January. Our first item of consideration this evening is a public meeting and action on the Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital at 660 Westmoreland Road. We will be reviewing the recommendations from the City Manager's Hospital Advisory Committee on the overall site plan for the replacement of the hospital, the architectural design of the building, the exterior lighting, and preliminary landscape concepts. We're reviewing this because it's a condition of the previously approved master plan, and we need to review it here this evening and then forward our recommendations on to the City Council. With us from the Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital are Representatives Tom McAfee, President of Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital, and Mark Shoemaker, a principal at Pelley Clark Pelley Architects. So who would, from the hospital, would like to present this evening?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, fellow commissioners. My name is Tom McAfee. I'm the hospital president, and very much delighted to be back today and respectfully give you an update on what we've been up to since our last meeting, and seek to provide clarity to some of the thoughts that were advanced or additional questions, and also have an opportunity to spend some time with the principal of our architectural team and going through some of the details of what we're proposing. And then, of course, seeking respectfully your approval for our work that's been underway for some time. I also think I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the city staff, Kathy Cerniak and Bob Kiley, and the city team throughout this process. They've been wonderful to work with, very collaborative. I also would like to thank the City Advisory Committee that's been appointed, and I think we've had 9 or 10 meetings now, and have really worked hard and have made this a better project. In fact, we've been working on this project for, I believe, 26 months, I think was what we were counting when we were driving over this evening. And I have to say that throughout the process, it has continued to improve. And I think what you'll see this evening is a spectacular facility, spectacular in every respect, and not only aesthetically, but I think the architects have done an enormous job of recognizing the priorities of our community, working collaboratively in advancing a facility that's truly spectacular in every front. So with that, I'd like to turn this presentation over to our principal architect, Mark Shoemaker, who will carry us through with the details of the plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom, and good evening. Pleasure to be with you again. I'm happy to go through the items you see on the agenda there, primarily the site plan, the building design, and lighting. All these items are elements that we've discussed and debated and shared with the Community Advisory Committee, so none of that material is new. What you are seeing for you that is new are the elements on the table. We brought the white model to you last time, but we've chosen to bring tonight so that you're really clear on some of the detailing and massing of the building, both the materials of the building, some samples, as well as an overall site plan, and you had actually requested this when we were together last, to show how the building sits into the greater context, and you can see that in that larger model on the right-hand side of the table. And we'll go through that in greater detail as we go through some of the subjects here. This is just to show you that we have complied with really all the special use permit dimensional requirements. This is in your packet. I'm not going to go through all this line by line at this moment, but a number of these elements will come up as we go through the rest of the presentation. First, starting with the site plan, just to go through some of the basic elements once again, the building from the very beginning was meant to be a true marriage between the site and the program for Northwestern. And in doing so, the building became a much lower scale, basically a 3-story building with mechanical penthouses that we put into a crescent shape that engaged the necessary water elements and actually enhanced it by way of a reflecting pool to create a real place and a real connective link between the south and north campuses, as you see there. Putting the parking to the west of the structure and linking it up in that more organic way, taking advantage of the topography, the existing roadway system, and the views to the water. Now, coupled with that, we continue to respect let me get my pointer out. The berms, the edge conditions of the site. We have berming along the south, the west, and the south. And in particular, on the north side, there is a no-build zone of 75 feet from the southern edge of Westmoreland, as well as these drumlins that occur on the west and the south end of the site, which provide shielding for residents on the west and on Lane Lorraine to the south. There are also existing berms that will remain along the north side here. So we're really cocooning the site to protect the neighborhoods and kind of shield the view to the building, at least until you get into the interior portion of the site. Speaking of the berms, these are just a series of sections cut through strategic places within the plan. The first one is Westmoreland, cut through on a north-south axis, and you can see the topography there. You can see also the topography through the drumlins on Waukegan, as well as Lane Lorraine. So along with the berms, we'll be keeping the existing trees if they're healthy, and also adding more to that as necessary to provide the proper shielding in those locations. Another issue has been, let me go back actually just a minute. There has been an issue that we've been dealing with, which is on the new connector road here that is more the central access to the building. Off of Westmoreland, there was concern about headlights spilling into the cottages here. And we've taken some pains to look at that very carefully and to be very sensitive to it. And here you can see the actual site. This stick with the flag on it is actually the center line of that road as it meets Westmoreland. And you can see that there, between the berms, where the road is, the trees that are part of the berm and that whole shelter area, any headlights that occur are really going to be absorbed by that berm and any of the landscape. So we don't really feel that it's really much of an issue. Coupled with that, the issue of traffic to some extent. Just to go through the basics, here are the basic roadways, obviously off of exit 41, that then come around to the perimeter of the site and then move you into the building. From that direction, there's also the access on Westmoreland from Waukegan. There's also the new access road, which will be primarily staff and emergency department, which is located once again at the southern portion of the structure. What this means, though, I think to the advantage of the neighborhoods to the north, is that it will really deactivate that part of Westmoreland from the primary traffic going in and out of the project, because really most people will be coming in this way or that way or the other two locations, but these really will be the two primary access points. Along with the more functional roadway system, there's also going to be walking paths, fitness paths, and biking routes that will be incorporated. And what you're looking at here simply are the solid lines, or what will be put in as part of phase one. And the dotted lines will be the future phasing, which will further enhance the interconnectability between the north and south campuses, as well as interfacing with existing paths and allowing people to pass through this site as part of an overall system of both walking and cycling. Now, moving to the building design, we continue to be looking at a building, as I said before, that is 3 stories tall with mechanical shielded at the top. We're well within the special permit heights and much shorter than the original master plan vision of this. Once again, taking advantage of the topography and really seeking to blend this building into the landscape as much as possible, and architecturally taking lessons from prairie architecture, frankly, to further enhance that sense of connection with the ground and with the landscape. And as we've continued to detail the building and evolve it, continue to update our views of the building from various vantage points, from Green Bay, from Waukegan, and within the site. And I'll show you how that has progressed as we've gotten greater detail. This is the view from the Green Bay neighborhood. As before, it's still a very low building, and it'll be very, very hard to see from that kind of distance, even in the wintertime. Even from Lane Lorraine, also difficult to see. I mean, we purposely did not put trees in this image just so we could get a glimpse of the building, just to show in maybe a worst case scenario, what you would see from that vantage point. Of course, as you get onto Waukegan and actually get to the access road and Westmoreland, then the building starts to make an appearance. And as you get further into the site, this is Waukegan, you start to see the building and see the scale of it. And of course, as you really get into the site, and this is getting towards the common area that is really about the more formal approach to the building, then the building opens up. But once again, it's a series of small pavilions linked together by a 1-story element across the site. I think very gently touching the ground and into the site. And then as you get to the front door, the building opens up into a public front door that we see as a very inviting, warm, and nicely scaled entrance, not too large, not too small, with a drivable plaza, with all the access that one needs to get into the central part of the building. And then just to give you a sense of what all these volumes mean in terms of the experience inside of the building, that front door opens up into a lobby that runs from the entrance all the way to the lake, with views out both ends. So this idea of transparency is greatly enhanced through the building. And from a wayfinding point of view, the building is made very superior by that, so that people under stress know exactly where they're going, and it's a very clear diagram. And at the end of that lobby is this place, this space we call the rotunda, which looks out onto the lake and will offer opportunities to get out onto the water, as well as look down into a food court at the lower level. And then the circulation space kind of springs from this rotunda, both north and south. Another major entrance will be the emergency. And essentially this is a smaller version, if you will, scaled from the main entrance. This is one of the major apertures into the building. It too wants to be a clear, concise, and friendly opening into the building with some of the same sun shading and architectural detailing. When I was here last, there was a question about the northernmost pavilion, about its relationship to Westmoreland, and how it would transform as it went from first phase to future phases. In its first phase, it is a 1-story pavilion with all the same kind of architectural detailing as all the other pavilions, but as I said, 1-story tall. There's ample room between it and Westmoreland. I think there's a very comfortable relationship there. And because the building articulation, which is very horizontal in its character, adding on vertically, we think is a very easy thing to do, and actually came into our minds as we developed these buildings, knowing that we may have to develop them vertically over time. So as you move from phase 1 to future phases, this sort of stacking, we believe, works very, very well. And we can then ultimately fashion and craft this building to look like all the other pavilions in terms of scale and mass. And of course, on the water side, the lake side, that's remained pretty much the same, with a public concourse that runs on the first level across the entire length of the building on this side. There are some special spaces in the pavilions, which are special waiting rooms as part of the patient floors. And then the rotunda itself that you saw the interior of is actually right there, which is at the end of the lobby hall. And at nighttime, and we'll get into the lighting a bit more in detail, this is the side that has a bit more brightness, but even that is dampened a bit by the overhangs from a dark sky point of view. And the real primary lighting is really at the lowest level, at the lobby level that runs across, and probably at the rotunda. Now, in terms of the actual architectural detailing, this is a new image that I know you haven't seen, but the CAC has. We've done a number of more detailed drawings about the facades. They are starting to become much more evolved and resolved in terms of their articulation. And we see the basic material of these buildings to be brick, and those two samples are on the table here. We are using two different bricks, but the primary brick is a brick that is about the same reddish color as the existing building. It's a standard brick, and we're using a slightly darker brick to give scale to those parts of the walls that don't have as much windows because of program requirements, to give them scale and character, and really just to highlight certain architectural elements within the building. And then this is the view from the lakeside showing the waiting spaces, so that's that larger area of glass that's associated with that very public part of the pavilion. And then some of the typical hospital rooms as they turn the corner on the end elevation. This is the end of the building, the west end, facing the parking with the public stairs that occur at the end of each of the pavilions. On the long sides of the pavilions, we have taken great pains to create a choreography of window types and glass to deal with the program that comes up against the glass. We have bathrooms, for instance, that are part of the patient rooms that come up against the glass. We didn't want to see those be large blank areas, so we are actually offering translucent glass to bring some light into those bathrooms, as well as a shadow box glass panel with ceramic frit, and you'll see examples of those on the table as well, to create the pattern that you see here. And then as we move to the medical office building, not to make the medical office building a duplicate of the bed towers, but to keep it within the family of expression, we're using fritted glass and clear glass and a module of window paneling that starts to mimic what's happening in the patient pavilions. And looking more carefully, I know it's a little hard to see, the articulation on the facade of the building, we're looking to create reveals, insets of metal, articulation around window frames to give this wall a lot of texture and character, and not be just a flat wall, something that will cast shadows and be something interesting to look at as you get closer and closer to the building. I should also mention the overhangs are made of what is called GFRC, which is a fiberglass reinforced concrete product, which is lightweight. It's moldable into about any shape you wish, and that's the material of choice to create these shapes and all the turns and corners that you see on the roof lines of the building. Moving to the site lighting, there are really 5 fundamental components to the lighting scheme. And we see the lighting scheme as being overall much bigger improvement over the existing lighting that exists today. Starting with the sort of the outer edge, we have the existing fixtures, and I will show you photographs of each one of these fixtures, so we'll get there. But the outer ring is essentially the existing fixtures that the community knows very well. They're more decorative. And then as we move into the inner zones, such as the interior roadways, parking, the common areas, and the building entrances, the fixtures change in an effort, one, to be more compatible with the new architecture, also seeking to employ much more efficient fixtures, and fixtures also that will not glare as much, being very sensitive to the perception of light, but from all sides of the building. So being more specific, here's the lineup of fixtures that we see being used. These are the fixtures that are there today, and will be the fixtures that will remain around the perimeter, in an effort, frankly, also to kind of mix the traditional fixtures of the past with the new fixtures of the new building. And in all cases, our goals are these here. One, to complement the architecture. Two, to deal with the dark sky issue, to try to be as responsible to that as possible. Cutting down on glare as much as possible. Limit the light pole height, which is very important. And certainly trying to be energy efficient in all cases. And as you can see by this chart to the bottom, we believe all the fixtures, except for the traditional one, are meeting all of that criteria. The other takeaway is on the upper part of the panel, you can see that in general what's happening is as the fixtures get closer to the building, they become shorter. They also become closer together as they get closer to the building. And it gets a little bit brighter as we get closer to the building. All of this done for safety reasons, as well as choreographing the light so that we're not providing an eyesore to the surrounding neighborhoods. Should also add that all the fixtures, certainly all the new fixtures, as you'll see in some of the diagrams I'm going to show you, the actual light source is embedded deep into the underside of those fixtures. So you're not really going to be able to perceive the bulbs, the hot spots of those fixtures, unless you're really literally near or underneath them. And here's a good example of that. Here is the existing, more traditional fixture that is on Westmoreland now. As we get into the interior roadways, we're suggesting a fixture here, which is about the same height as the existing, but you can see the difference in the cutoff. And that will greatly contribute to its sort of more subtle impact on the environment and the whole idea of perceived light within this environment. As we move into the parking areas, right now there are a number of fixtures that are nearly 30 feet tall with a fairly wide cutoff. There's a lot of glare. They're also very sporadic in terms of their light source. What we're seeking to do in the next generation is to go to an 18-foot high pole with a lesser cutoff, or a greater cutoff, I should say, and also a fixture that will also distribute the light more evenly across the parking lots. And I'll show you an image of what that really means. As we get a little bit closer to the front door, the commons area is that sort of formal processional roadway that takes you to the front door. Once again, these fixtures are, the actual fixture is up in the housing of this and will be mostly lighting the ground and with a fairly tight cutoff, creating this sort of avenue of light as you get to the front door and leading you to the front door. So the photometrics, this is the overall photometric diagram. I think the takeaway here is these two images here. Here's, in a very simple way, showing the way the light distributes on the parking lot right now. These hot spots are those bright source lights on those 30-foot poles. What we're seeking to do, and by the way, this is that parking lot to the south next to Lloyd and Lorraine, which we are reducing in size to this size. And you can see just by looking very quickly, the idea is to distribute the light much more evenly and lower down, which at the end of the day gives us much better safety, much less glare, and much less light pollution to the surrounding areas. And we're doing that all with less foot candles, less light, ultimately, than the existing fixtures. So we're also being very efficient. And once again, just the amount of light is being curtailed and really guided carefully for all its very specific uses. So it's a little hard to see with all the lights on in the room, but maybe you can see what I'm trying to tell you here, which is this is the existing lighting right now in lot 12. So we get these hot spots in these really bright areas and then these great areas of darkness or darker areas. So there's a lot of disparity. Whereas what we're looking to achieve is more of this, which gives you greater continuity of light. It's obviously safer, more effective in terms of guiding people to their cars. And at the same time, the fixtures are much more subtle in terms of their glare, and in our cases will be much lower than the ones that exist today. So that leaves us to the more detailed elements under development, which we will be coming back to you with at a later time. Namely, a more detailed planting plan for the landscape, using the concept that we've shown you in the last 2 meetings, as well as coming back and talking more specifically about the signage, the site signage, primarily the monument signs and the vehicular and pedestrian signs that will be part of the system for the hospital, and talking about materials, lighting, and those kind of details that are associated with all those locations. And with that, I welcome questions and the next steps. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. I think before we do that, we'll turn to Kathy for staff comments on what we have before us.
Thank you, Chairman Lay, members of the commission. I wanted to start with just a few refresher comments on the process. I know the Plan Commission has heard this before, but I always think it's a good place to start to remember how much time the community, the Plan Commission, the City Council has spent on this project to date. This project first came before the Plan Commission in September 2011. That was an introduction of the master plan. A series of 5 meetings, through a series of 5 meetings, the Plan Commission questioned, challenged, deliberated, listened to hours of public testimony, and in May of 2012, the Plan Commission forwarded a recommendation in support of the special use permit and the master plan to the City Council. The City Council, after a number of meetings and again deliberation, refinement, and working through the legal language of the special use permit, granted approval of the special use permit in October of 2012. I have that date right, I lose track. Of 2012. As part of the Plan Commission's recommendation, as part of your discussion, you recognize that this is a very unique project for Lake Forest. The magnitude of the project is greater than anything Lake Forest has ever seen and will ever see. And certainly the complexity and the importance of this development to the community was something that the Plan Commission talked about for a while. And you ended up recommending that the City Council do something a little bit different, recognizing the importance of this project. And the City Council endorsed your recommendation and directed the City Manager to appoint a Hospital Advisory Committee. That committee is made up of 9 individuals. Board Member Ziccarelli serves on that committee. That committee has been meeting with the hospital project team since January of this year, just about monthly with 1 or 2 exceptions. Normally with the master plan, once the master plan is approved, the petitioner, the developer, the property owner goes away and does the design development on their own. In this case, it was a very different process where the advisory committee was with the hospital project team really every step of the way, referencing the master plan, referencing the criteria in the special use permit, and making sure all along the way that the design as it developed was in compliance with what was already approved by the City Council. What is before the Plan Commission today is significantly more detailed plans and really plans that really took to heart the community discussion that occurred during the master plan. The plans before you come forward with the recommendation, with the endorsement of the advisory committee, and there are 4 recommendations in front of you. Those recommendations include approval of the overall site plan, approval of the building architecture, approval of the lighting zone plan, and approval of the conceptual landscape plan. You are looking at those plans, again, to assure compliance with the master plan and special use permit, both of which have already been adopted. We're not revisiting the master plan. You don't have any direction to do that, but are here really as a true-up to make sure that the plans that have come forward really are true to what was discussed. And I don't mean to speak for the advisory committee, but I think the report that you have in your packet really emphasizes that the plan that came forward is exceeds expectations in every way as far as where that master plan might end up as far as the final plan goes. The advisory committee report pulled from the master plan and from the special use permit each condition, each requirement and each specific direction and walks through that in a very detailed fashion. So that has really made your work more of a checklist to go through and understand the advisory committee's decision on each item. Importantly, the work on this project is not done. Certainly the advisory committee recognized that. At this point in the project, it is not unusual for us not to have a detailed landscape plan and not to have detailed signage plans. Those will go back through the advisory committee in whatever time frame works for the hospital. It's not something that needs to be approved right now. Importantly, what approval of the plans that are now before you does is really allow the hospital to move forward on various fronts, certainly with more detailed plan development, with engineering work, with final approvals from other agencies, with financial planning. So the advisory committee felt that it was important that this part of the plan move forward. In the report that you received from the advisory committee, you not only received recommendations for 4 actions, but each of those actions carry with them recommended conditions of approval. And in particular, the advisory committee, again, because of the complexity of this project, is recommending, not unlike something that the Building Review Board or Historic Preservation Commission would do, but they're recommending that a subcommittee of the advisory committee join the city staff in the administrative review process when we do ultimately get a permit set in of the plans for the hospital. So that is one recommendation. Another recommendation has to do with open space. The advisory committee recognized that the special use permit does require some mechanism for identifying a portion of the campus for permanent preservation as open space. The advisory committee talked about the minimum area for preservation being the buffer areas to the south, to the west, and to the north. The city attorney, in conversations with the attorney for the hospital, is currently reviewing options for tools that could be achieved to satisfy that condition, and that will ultimately, the specific tool selected to meet that requirement will ultimately be a decision of the city council. But you do have a recommendation from the advisory committee that a condition of approval be forwarded to the city council, re-emphasizing the importance of preserving some portion of the site. I do quickly just want to acknowledge that you did receive some additional letters since your last meeting. Some you received last week. Additional letters were put before you tonight. Those letters do raise some issues, particularly with respect to the new access road off of Waukegan Road that really moves traffic directly toward the entrance to the main hospital. Since receiving those letters and comments, I did go back, talk with various city staff, engineering staff, police staff, staff from the fire department, and city staff continues to be strongly supportive of that access road. That access road, the connection point with Westmoreland, is specifically reflected in the master plan, is something that was thought to be necessary during those discussions. The advisory committee spoke to the need for that road early in their process, and from a technical standpoint, various staff at the city continue to feel that that is important. Certainly as we work through final detailed engineering plans, we will continue to look at what is the exact right configuration of that road, what is the appropriate angle at which it meets Westmoreland Road, and carefully looking at what we can do to minimize headlight impact and facilitate smooth traffic movements in that area. I also recognize that there also are comments in your letters about the setback distance along that north edge of the property. In the master plan, the setback distances for that area as well as for the west perimeter of the site and the south perimeter of the site are specified. At the time of the master plan discussions, it was recognized that the that Lake Forest Place is a residential development, but is somewhat of a different character than the single-family homes on the south side. It was also recognized that there is a 75-foot setback on the north side of Westmoreland Road, and as the master plan was being discussed, the 75 feet on either side of Westmoreland Road and the approximately 30-foot width of Westmoreland Road was looked at and seen to be an appropriate setback. So I just wanted to review that those items were carefully reviewed as part of the master plan, and that the plan presented does comply with those. That completes my comments, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. I think it would be appropriate, Augie, as a member of the Hospital Advisory Committee, do you have anything else to quickly remind us of that perhaps hasn't been covered?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just to add to what Kathy has said, the result of our findings was a 14-page report comparing what's being presented by the hospital versus the master plan that was approved by the City Council back in October 2012. That report was the result of a lot of conversation, a lot of dialogue with the design team, with the hospital, and with the advisory committee. Just to maybe concisely talk about a few things, many of the things are black and white, and to give you a feel of how these plans exceed what the master plan had called for. The master plan called for a minimum of 65% open space overall on the campus. The hospital plan that's in front of us is 72%, so they exceed that. 50% open space is required on the central campus. The plan that's provided is 69% open space. There is a maximum of 15% allowable building coverage. The plan that's presented is 8% overall. 20% building coverage is allowed on the central campus. 8% is covered by building on the central campus. There is a floor area ratio of 0.3 allowed on the central campus. What's being provided is 0.8. So by every measurable statistic in terms of abiding by the master plan, in terms of measurable items, building height as well as overall green space, open space, floor area ratio, the hospital has complied with that. So part of our job as the Hospital Advisory Committee was to provide constructive feedback as well as things are being designed, check against what master plan was approved. So with that in mind, Chairman, I just wanted to add those comments.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ziccarelli. At this point, I would ask the commission, are there any questions of the petitioner or of staff before we go to public testimony?
Well, I would like to see for a moment, if I could, a site plan. I think that maybe your circulation plan might be good to put up, Mr. Schumacher. Good to see you again. Very nice presentation, by the way.
Thank you. This one here?
Perhaps the one that shows it a little bit more, that one would be good.
Okay.
And this is specifically with regard to the connector road, which we heard about at the last session. I haven't been, unfortunately, involved with the whole length of all of the meetings on this, so I kind of am catching up, but I recall it being a point at the last meeting. And it was helpful to see your renderings in the packet this time and the ones you showed this evening. And also, I was wondering, with the configuration of the connecting road, it doesn't just go linearly into Westmoreland. You have a serpentine kind of an S-curve.
That's correct.
And I think when I left at the last session about a month ago, I was wondering, is that going to be a stream of headlights heading from the Rotary, the central entry place, onto those cottages and be rather monotonous? But looking at your plan here, and with that those couple banks of trees you have up there in that acute angle, that actually the amount of traffic that's going to be going directly toward the cottages is really going to be reduced up until maybe the time a car would turn close by those trees and then make its, I imagine, predominantly left-hand turn to go to Waukegan Road.
Probably so. Yeah.
And it occurred to me that that area right there is really kind of a blocker, that bank of trees, and that I think that that's an interesting solution to part of the concerns, and it potentially maybe that could even be elaborated on somewhat. I think that to try to move the connector road closer and closer to Waukegan is probably not a good idea, because then you'll get a backup of cars at the light. It could get to be more dangerous than it's possibly worth. And I know this whole thing is basically initiated by the fact that we have a stoplight on Waukegan Road at Westmoreland and Middle Fork Drive, so the idea of moving something is really kind of constrained with that regard.
Correct.
So I think that somehow this isn't as bad as it might have been, and I think that the solution there might even have a few more tweaks in it that could be investigated, and possibly a little berm at that area of the trees.
And
be
there are some
introduced.
existing berms here as well.
Yeah.
As exhibited by that section. So you're absolutely correct. We are trying to mitigate and soften that as much as we can.
And I have another question. Does anybody else have a question about that particular thing that you want to?
I have one related. On page 6, which I think is a slide before, there's a statement that says, that's the one. That text up in the middle, upper middle, it says, with a west access road, the north portion of Westmoreland will not be used by hospital patients, visitors, physicians, or staff. How do we know that?
That's the expectation, given the fact that the shortest path, people will take the shortest path from exit 41 or from Waukegan. That's the centroid of the project. So people are going to want to migrate to that. To go up and around is really counterintuitive. So that's why we say what we say. So this will take this right into the project and down to the front door. And of course, from Waukegan, that will go directly from west to east. So that's the reason behind that statement.
Thank you.
Well, that's interesting, because I was even wondering, with that sort of sleight of hand, and now you see it, now you don't. I'm wondering if an introduction of some plantings between those two roads might assist in that sort of downplaying of Westmoreland for the lay visitor that's not familiar with it. If you're coming in off 41 and you'll arrive at Westmoreland with the green line, you see, I mean, that's the idea, is to create a feeling of a continuation so that they don't go to Westmoreland. And maybe if you could introduce some plantings to make Westmoreland even somewhat more invisible from that road, that
I see what you're
becomes
saying.
out of sight, out of mind for any future, say.
There'll also be signage that will probably also be reinforcing it. So that's another factor too.
I had another question, and I saw this in the staff report and in the advisory committee's findings. And Kathy, this might be partially for you as well, and maybe Augie. Is it the intent, because there's quite a bit of architectural information tonight that we hadn't seen before, but at the same time, there's a level of, I see some material samples tonight too. I wondered if we would have those. But for such an important structure, and looking at this more than just the 25 years out that an engineer would design a structure to, over a period of quite a long time. You know, we're so used to our old hospital with the old, if copper turns green, that's fine. Is there going to be, and not that I question your abilities at all, I don't, is there going to be some sort of an activity before the permit set hits the table to have, say, time for discussion about materiality as far as its durability, things of that nature and so forth? Is that planned to possibly be a part of the process going forward?
Go ahead.
Yes? Okay.
The intention is for the advisory committee to continue work on a number of different areas, landscaping, architecture, et cetera. maybe, if I understand right, maybe not meet as a full 9-member group, but as we go from this point forward and things become more specialized, to have some members of the advisory committee still engaged with the design team and continue on to the point where the drawings are ready for permit, or at least far enough along that they would be, ready to be detailed out. So my understanding, and Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, the advisory committee will stay intact to some degree to handle those specialized areas.
That is a recommendation from the advisory committee, and again, it's not unlike, even for much smaller projects, Commissioner Berg, as you know, the Building Review Board or Historic Preservation Commission would appoint a 2-member subcommittee that would meet with staff and have those discussions. How does a certain material wear? In fact, the advisory committee has raised some questions about some of the materials and understanding better how they'll go together, what the transition areas will be. So that there will be an opportunity for those discussions to occur, but it's really more at an administrative level with the benefit of bringing in appropriate members from the advisory committee.
Do I have time for another question? One more? Okay, just in general, about the overhangs on the building. They're intriguing in the general sense, particularly when you have your rendering of the water feature and the impact those have on the buildings are so wonderful in that they downplay any kind of a institutional factory type aesthetic that gets associated with modern architecture, contemporary. But how are those going to wear? I mean, are they going to be shedding water in a way that doesn't stain? I mean, they seem to be configured in a way that's not dripping as much as it's funneling water. Is this those are the details that you're going to be working out?
Well, we've thought this through. Those overhangs, the water will be draining from the edge back to the center of those roofs. They're not going to be, the water's not going to be brought to the edges of those. So to avoid exactly that problem, overflow, water dripping over, and so forth. So I think you're going to have a clean edge to deal with. The GFRC itself is a very maintainable, very substantial material that has a good history. They may need to be repainted from time to time, but that is a matter of typical maintenance for anything like that, whether it be GFRC or metal or whatever. So we're not anticipating that to be a major issue. And because they are soffits, they won't be directly in the weather. They'll be somewhat protected, but for instance, we're using concrete. We're not using the plaster version of GFRP because it is an exterior application for that extra toughness and maintainability over a long term.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. This one would be for Mr. McAfee, if you wouldn't mind. Back in September of 2011, when you first did come before us, I seem to remember that the original concept for the hospital structure was more vertical in nature, both for reasons of operational efficiency, but of course that engendered some public concern with respect to the overall potential height of the structure. And now we have a plan before us that seems far more horizontal, far smaller in height, and I'm just wondering what changed.
Sure. It's a good question. You have to also recall where we were in the design concept at the stage when we were looking at the land use plan. It was difficult for us to really understand the final geometry of the structure, understanding the relationship between the emergency room, the cath labs, and the ICU and the like, how we were going to distribute materials and just general flow. What we are so pleased about with this design is that we were able, through exceptional designers internally, to understand that relationship and not compromise, because probably the biggest concern that we had, that I advocated, was that we didn't want to be unduly constrained to create a situation that might work aesthetically, but from an internal standpoint would not be safe for patient flow. We've done a series of time studies with this design. The clinical plate that sits at the base of those inpatient pavilions is enormously efficient, and in fact, we're very pleased that we have not had to have a compromise between safety and quality and the vertical issues that we were originally concerned about.
No, I think it's greatly mitigated concerns with respect to the overall height of the structure. I have another question on height for you, Augie. It's in the advisory report. I note that there's a couple of sections that are checked not partially in compliance. The rooftop mechanicals on the southernmost pavilion exceed the 60-foot height limitation. Refresh me as to where the 60-foot height limitation comes from.
Right. We may even have a slide on that. I believe that there's layered building height zoning, if you want to call it that, within the site.
Ah.
In other words, the entire site is not all at the same level.
There it is.
And so when we got more horizontal, and Mark, you can probably explain better than I can.
No, you're doing well. We keep going.
If we go more horizontal, we encroached on the lower building height for one corner, I believe, of that fifth pavilion. And so the fact that they were so below the other pavilion allowable heights, we felt that was a compelling reason to leave it as is, rather than try to make an adjustment in the one pavilion.
Correct.
So is this requiring, this doesn't require a change in the special use permit, or does it?
My understanding is the master use plan are not building codes, but guidelines for design and development. And tell me if I'm wrong, Kathy, something like this, where it's 90% in compliance and probably 100% in compliance with the spirit of what is in the master plan?
And in fact, the master plan recognized the opportunity for mechanical equipment to exceed that. The specified heights encouraged that they not, but it did make that allowance, so no amendment to the master plan is needed.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, questions?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Good. I just have one question in terms of the site plan.
Yes, sir.
I've not been on the grounds in recent years, but to either the west or the north of the existing buildings, there are a series of small homes, cottages, however they're described. Are they at all modified, changed, or anything
Let me
because
go
of this
to a
site
different
plan?
site plan so I can answer you very directly. So if you could tell me one more again, what structures you're thinking?
Go to what was page 8 of our handout. It's the one with the zone heights on it.
Oh, that's the one we were just at.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you look at the current
This one here, Mr. Chairman?
hospital, yes, the current hospital structure,
Right.
and again, I've not been back there for a while, but
Which
are those,
700 buildings, so 800, yeah, right, yeah, south of that, right there.
And the question, I'm sorry, the question once again?
the question is, are those structures at all affected? They are not, okay.
No,
That was
we're
my-
not touching those.
Okay. Thank you. The other questions I had have been asked and answered.
Very good.
Okay, further questions? Guy, did you have one or two more?
You know, actually, there's one thing that I wanted to just sort of add about the lighting, and it's nothing that you've really presented. It's just an observation, because I travel this road a lot going to the Fitness Institute. And coming south on the road, as it serpentines along the highway, there's a couple of places in the evening and when it's dark out that are really hard to see which way the road goes. And with that many wiggles in it, it's hard to even memorize that road. And I can't imagine that when there's a snow cover, it's really kind of hard to pick the curb up without snow, let alone with snow. And I'm wondering if that could be somehow addressed. It's close enough to where your building will be. It's just south of it. That's really kind of and just since the new repaving, it's been, I just think that it may need to be revisited. It's not very safe, and the road is only traveled as much as it is now. And I'm not sure if it's a lighting issue. It's just really hard to see and to anticipate the curvatures.
Okay. Okay. It is now time to move to public comment. But before we do that, I would like to do something that I should have done before we started hearing it, and that is, do any members of the commission have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest on this matter? Okay, seeing none, we'll begin public testimony. We have a lot of people here this evening. I assume some or many of you would like to testify or give comments on what is before us. Can I just see a quick show of hands of those who may wish to appear? Okay, good. Our procedure is 5 minutes, and please, whoever would like to be first, please come on up. And please provide us with your name and address, please, before you address us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Bert Weller. I live with my wife for 15 years at 923 Barclay Circle in Lake Forest. I suspect that many of you are wondering why I am here and why so many people from Lake Forest Place are here. You should know that the residents of Lake Forest Place became aware of what this proposed development would do to our lives and our security at Lake Forest Place. We only became aware of that in the receipt of your public meeting notice dated 9/28, and with that meeting notice, a plan which showed a road which would definitely impact us, which showed the destruction of the berm which protects the southern perimeter of our place, and a 75-foot setback with substantially larger setbacks for surrounding areas. There were a lot of questions about these plans and what impact they would have on us. And since many of the residents had not had a great deal of time to study this, they asked that there be a commission or a committee appointed, a task force appointed, that would look into what the hospital planned to do and to look at its impacts upon us. The chairman of our Resident Advisory Council appointed a task force, and I was dragooned into leading that task force and drafting the letter which you've received. The letter which you've received is the result of our study and our opinions about what's going on and what is likely to impact us. That report, that letter, was returned to the Resident Advisory Council. The recommendations we made were unanimously approved by the Resident Advisory Council. We then subsequently met with both the management of Presbyterian Homes and also with the hospital staff. We still felt that it was necessary for us to appear here tonight. The interest that the residents have shown, I think, is made plain by the number of residents of Lake Forest Place which are here this evening. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask that those residents who are here raise their hands so you'll know how many are here. Someone has counted them for me and has informed me that there are at least 30 people from Lake Forest Place here tonight. Please be assured that as residents of Lake Forest Place, we completely and thoroughly support the development of the new hospital. We've looked at the plans, we like what we see, we're very much in support of the hospital plans, but there are some elements of what has been proposed which will impact our safety and our quality of life, and we'd like to have you hear our discussion of what you have received in the letter that you have received. I believe that's correct. All of you have received our letter. Thank you. We have basically three...
Last week.
I'm sorry?
We received it last week.
That's fine, yes, of course. And I'm assuming you've had a chance to read it and understand what we're trying to say. We have three basic concerns. The entrance-exit road intersecting Westmoreland, approximately midway between Pembridge Drive and Waukegan Road. The setbacks in so-called buffer zones along Westmoreland, and the loss of the earth berm along the south side of Westmoreland. Let me go into a little more detail about our concerns. Our concern with the exit entry road intersecting Westmoreland is basically the concern for our residents exiting Pembridge Drive, our principal exit entrance to the Lake Forest Place campus, and about a city block away encountering another road intersection, a road intersection which will be characterized by left-turning people from the hospital attempting to get to Waukegan Road. Unfortunately, most of us are a little bit older than the average citizen of Lake Forest, and perhaps our reflexes aren't quite as good as some of the other residents of Lake Forest, and we think this represents a safety hazard for the residents of Lake Forest Place. Another aspect of our concern is that we have seen the exit from Highway 41, and we like that exit, but it also, in our mind, represents what this intersection will look like, with its street lights, with its directional signing, and with its obvious intrusion upon the neighboring parts of our community. I heard someone say tonight that Lake Forest Place is a little different from single-family homes. I would remind you that the residences to the north of the hospital grounds are essentially single-family homes. And they, excuse me.
You've exceeded the 5 minutes, but I would ask unanimous consent from the commission that we give you another 4 minutes since you're the chairman of the Resident Advisory Committee. Is that right?
No, I'm the chairman of the task force, which
Task force.
was
Well, given
appointed.
your position in that regard, let's, if you could take 4 more minutes and then
Okay.
complete. Thank you.
Until just 3 weeks ago, if you think about it, there were 2 entrance exits to the hospital campus, Deerpath and Waukegan. With the completion of the Highway 41 connector, there are now 3 entrance exits to the hospital campus. With the completion of the south road, the south access roads, there will be 4 entrance exits to the Lake Forest Hospital campus. Do we really need a 5th entrance exit? That became pretty obvious to us. Why have a 5th one? So what we would suggest basically is that the South Connector Road be completed as soon as possible and connect to the existing 990 building parking lots and to the employee parking lot in that area, and that over the next year or 2, as construction proceeds, that there be traffic studies which would then determine, is that entry-exit road really necessary? It has problems for us, and we wonder if it's really necessary. If it is determined after some extensive study of traffic patterns, after all 4 entrance exits are complete and in business, then we would suggest perhaps you would ease our problem if you directed that entrance exit road be inbound only, in other words, southbound, so we would not have the problem of left-turning hospital patrons exiting the campus. The next area of concern of ours is the earth berm. None of these plans contain earth berms on the north side. We're concerned that the omission of those earth berms in the drawings would indicate that that earth berm would be done away with and replaced by, of all things, a bike path. I don't know how you run a bike path across the top of an earth berm that's several feet high. We would like to make sure that that earth berm is preserved and that the drawings reflect the fact that that berm is to stay in place and provide the kind of protection that we have always enjoyed from the potential for lights and noise from the development of the hospital campus. The next area of concern is setbacks. 75 feet plus the width of Westmoreland is not a very comparable setback to what you have asked for Lane Lorraine, which is set at 200 feet, and the Waukegan Road setback 250 feet. If you think about it, on the Waukegan Road side, I don't think any of those houses are anywhere as close to Waukegan Road as our residences are. We'd like to see a larger setback, first of all, to protect that earth berm, which we would like to see continue in place, providing protection. And we would also say perhaps protect it in perpetuity by using an easement rather than just a setback which can be voided at any time. We note already that within that setback there is some parking lot for the future planned and in place. My time is limited. I simply say to you, we do not object. We do not propose to delay the approval of the necessary beginnings of the development of the Lake Forest Hospital campus. We simply ask that there's some consideration be given to these kinds of things which will impact our safety and our quality of life at Lake Forest Place. We're almost 400 residents. 30 plus of them are here tonight demonstrating their concern, and we ask your consideration to our recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person who would like to speak.
Good evening, I'm John Centel. I'm president of Lake Forest Open Lands Association. I live at 545 Circle Lane in Lake Forest. And the board of directors of Lake Forest Open Lands has asked me to offer a few brief remarks on behalf of the organization. Thank you to the Plan Commission and the city for the opportunity to have Lake Forest Open Lands serve as a member of the Ad Hoc Hospital Advisory Committee. We have actively participated in what has been an excellent and collaborative process. The report and plan presented tonight have come a long way, due in large part to the careful review and the conditions set forth in the ordinances drafted by the Plan Commission many months ago. The commission's work at the outset provided the framework for the plans we see tonight. Importantly, these plans revealed an extraordinary architectural design at a reduced height, which protects important vistas. Lake Forest Open Lands is especially pleased that the recommendation tonight contains the promise of permanent open space to protect and buffer the contiguous neighborhoods and the remarkable nationally recognized Middle Fork Savanna Preserve. Middle Fork is a treasure for our community that was preserved by this commission and the City Council through the foresight and a pioneering private-public partnership which Lake Forest Open Lands is proud to have been a part of. We're pleased that the bike and pedestrian paths proposed in this plan provide direct connections between the hospital campus and surrounding open spaces and preserves. This reflects our community values and historical support of permanent protection of open space. We look forward to the development of this important aspect of the master plan. As our community's land trust and open space advocate, Lake Forest Open Lands supports the overall recommendation before you. We believe that reinforcing the need to designate permanent open space on the hospital campus is something our entire community hopes for, and the only way to ensure that the beauty and vistas of our Middle Fork area are protected forever, including that the residential buffer areas will remain inviolate, and that this hospital campus will blend in and respect the community and the landscape of which it is a part. We encourage the Commission's ongoing support of a final plan that reinforces Lake Forest's commitment to permanent open space and also delivers a landscaping plan that embraces native ecology and protects the important natural character of our community. In summary, this new master plan is a great example of how members of our community can and do work together thoughtfully and collaboratively as partners, with the end result being an improved hospital that fits harmoniously within our community while meeting the needs of a world-class facility. Lake Forest Open Lands will happily continue to serve on the city's advisory committee to assist our community in any way possible. Thank you to Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital for putting forth a plan that our community can embrace. And many thanks to the Plan Commission for listening and responding on behalf of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person who would like to speak, please. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Judy Bogus, and I live at 191 East Wesley Road, and I would like to commend all of you for the hard work that's gone into the plan so far. I'm looking a little bit to the future, and my question is whether a landscape designer has been employed. Is there a landscape architect going to be involved? And if so, has that person been chosen? And I think there's a lot of people who are very interested in the community looking forward as to the future of the landscaping. And I'd hope that we can have some more information on that for the public. My one question is purely a question on the plan, where the waterfall area is along the water. Has any discussion been made to soften the sharpness of that curb so that the people who are standing in the hospital could be also seeing the advantage of the waterfall? As it stands now, it will be on the far side of where the building is. And I'm wondering if with some softening and some shaping of that element, which could be an extraordinarily exciting thing, they will give the people in the hospital an opportunity to see both elements, the fall off and the water.
Well, to answer your first question, yes, there's a landscape architect on the job.
Grant.
He's actually here today.
If he's going to respond.
He's responsible for many of the things that you
Mr. Shoemaker, could you step to the mic, please? Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's all yours.
I'm sorry. So just to answer your questions, the first one, there is a landscape architect, Tom Moslin and Associates, and Tom is here tonight. He is responsible for the landscape design and was responsible for the things that you saw tonight. So yes. As far as the question regarding the water feature, the weir wall, as we call it, actually what we were trying to do is create an infinity edge, that is the visual element that you see from the hospital. I mean, once you get out onto the boardwalk, which is the walkway on the water side, you can hear the water, you can migrate to it. But from a visual point of view, what we're really trying to achieve is an infinity kind of water's distinct edge.
Thinking you could do the same thing if it were shaped.
Well, the problem is that then that brings around the water that is really the stormwater drainage, and that's going to be lower, and that's going to be at various heights. It may not be the same quality of water. That's the reason for the reflection pool and the upper level, to create a much more likable, friendly body of water right on the front edge of the hospital where people would really engage the water. So that's the reasoning for the shape that you see and the positioning of the two water bodies.
Thank you. Next person who would like to speak, please.
Good evening. My name is Todd Swartzell, and I serve as the president and CEO at Presbyterian Homes. Presbyterian Homes is the owner and operator of Lake Forest Place, a retirement community located adjacent to Lake Forest Hospital. Having the hospital as our neighbor is one of the community's greatest assets. Tom and the development team has been collaborative and kept both the organization and residents of Lake Forest Hospital informed as the planning for the replacement hospital has progressed. Tonight, I would like to briefly address two issues: the connector road and the property setbacks along Westmoreland Road. The first item I'd like to speak to is the connector road, or the main entrance point to the hospital from North Waukegan. Presbyterian Homes believes the connector road as proposed will have a positive impact on the community. In general, and specifically, we think it will have a positive impact on Lake Forest Place. Having the connector road provide immediate direct access to the interior of the hospital campus for patients, visitors, employees, and vendors who choose to access the hospital from the Waukegan-Westmoreland intersection is a positive thing. We think it's in the community's best interest to get hospital constituents into the hospital property as soon as possible for both improving wayfinding and safety on the site. This connector road will divert traffic off of Westmoreland Road, resulting in safer ingress and egress to the Lake Forest Place community, as well as to both the fitness center and the daycare center. The connector road will also promote community safety by providing enhanced visual wayfinding and access to the many important services offered by the hospital, most importantly, including the emergency care area. Presbyterian Homes continues to believe the connector road is in the best interest of the community and in the best interest of Lake Forest Place. We believe it will improve traffic flow, it will improve circulation and safety on the overall campus. The second item I'd like to speak to is to the written setback request made by the residents of Lake Forest Place. Presbyterian Homes does not, as an organization, believe the additional setback that's being requested by the residents of Lake Forest Place is needed. The hospital master plan represents a significant enhancement to the Lake Forest community. Presbyterian Homes believes that the Lake Forest Hospital Replacement Project will have an overall positive impact on the community of Lake Forest Place. This will be realized from both a resident safety and a marketing viewpoint. The hospital's commitment to maintaining the existing berm on the south side of Westmoreland Road with the distance proximity of any proposed new building in the master plan, we believe that a 75-foot setback is adequate. There's not really a building within a close proximity to any of the areas where if that were expanded, it would matter. Lake Forest Hospital has served the community for many years and will continue to do so. Presbyterian Homes, as an organization, does not think it's in our interest or Lake Forest community's interest to diminish the value of the adjoining hospital property with unnecessary setback requirements. In fact, we hope this adjoining land can be used to its greatest potential at some point in the future. We don't know what the community will look like 30 or 40 years from now, but we hope it can be used to its greatest potential in the future to enhance and promote the health and wellness of the community, Lake Forest community. Community health assets are very valuable assets, and Presbyterian Home would encourage the Plan Commission to preserve these assets for the intended use by the philanthropy that made the land purchase possible. I don't intend to speak for the residents that are here tonight. I think that they've spoken for themselves, but I do want to speak on behalf of the organization, the owner of Lake Forest Place, and our board of directors. Thank you for allowing me to address these important issues, and Presbyterian Homes would encourage the Plan Commission to move the project forward as it's currently planned.
Thank you, Mr. Swartzel. Additional people who would like to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tom Swarthout. I'm at 987 Maplewood Road. I'm a 58-year resident of Lake Forest, and I have some brief comments and responses to some of the comments that have been made. I have a lot of history with Lake Forest Hospital, and in fact, the city of Lake Forest. I was a former chairman of the Park Department. I was also an alderman for 6 years, and served as a committee member and board member of Lake Forest Hospital for 10 years, 3 years as chairman of the Building and Grounds, and 3 years as chairman of the board. At the time that Lake Forest Hospital sold the property to Presbyterian Homes, I was a new member of Lake Forest Hospital Board, and there was a lot of pushback within the community because of that sale. I'd like to remind people quite often that Lake Forest Hospital sits on 165 acres, and our main competitor, a friendly competitor, is Highland Park Hospital, which serves approximately the same population on 20 acres, roughly the same size buildings on both campuses. We took a lot of pride in purchasing all the land over the many years, just so the event that we could experience this kind of project today. And we're very sensitive to the neighbors, and I think the last project we did, which I was responsible for, was the Women's Center, the Hunters Women's Center. The sensitivity to the detail, I think, is proof of what we intend to do, or what Tom and his team intend to do. In fact, the berm that is in discussion tonight was really a result of my decision and not to transport those soils off campus. We chose to make some selective decisions on materials, such as the real slate on the Women's Center, the landscaping, as well as hiding the cooling tower, which is below grade. And it's because of my decision that the berm exists. I'd like to point out to the other berms that are in the community, and those are lush, well-planted, tree-lined. The berm that's in question right now has really just been graded and lightly seeded, well mowed, I must admit, but it was always intended to be temporary. I would like to get back, though, to Lake Forest Place. When it was first built, it was the largest building project in Lake County, and there was a lot of pushback within the community after they saw the size of the building. And those of us on the board, our response was, this is a shared responsibility of this community to provide this kind of need within the community, even though a large percentage of the people that were going to occupy this facility are not residents. We always felt, and feel today at Lake Forest Hospital, that our responsibility really moves across the border. So it's really disappointing now for the people who are in this room who are pushing back at Lake Forest Hospital's opportunity to continue that mission. I know there's been a lot of dialogue about how they support it, but I'm very concerned about the business people who are in Northwestern, who are down in Chicago, who are looking at their budgets, and we're, again, hesitating on making a decision. I would urge you tonight to really move forward quickly and get a vote. I think this proposal is phenomenal. It is a huge need. We need to move this institution forward. The technology that is being proposed will keep Lake Forest Hospital at the finest community hospital anywhere in the country. And I know everybody in this room kind of shares that vision, but I think Tom has really presented what is really the finest world-class facility, and I think we need to recognize that. So shared responsibility, it's for all of us to accept, and I would urge you for a vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swarthout. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to consideration of the issue. Kathy, do you have any response to the testimony?
Just a couple things. One, I might ask Mark in a moment to speak a little bit about that berm on the south side of Westmoreland. I don't believe it is planned for complete removal, so maybe you could talk a little bit about that in a moment. I also wanted to speak to the access road. And I think Commissioner Ziccarelli talked a little bit about this in your opening comments. The access road off of Westmoreland, east of Waukegan Road, is reflected in the master plan.
That's the southern access road?
No, the connector.
No,
The connector road.
I don't have a pointer here, but yes, the connector road that is the concern of some Lake Forest Place residents. In the master plan, it's my recollection that that road was in more of a north-south configuration. So as was explained earlier, the configuration that's shown now, after the intersection, it very quickly becomes an east-west road. So that change, I believe, was made between the adoption of the master plan and the site plan you see here, specifically in recognition of efforts to minimize headlight impacts on Lake Forest Place. I also wanted to offer, again, that what you're seeing is, these are not final engineering drawings, and I am confident that as we, the city engineering staff, as we continue to work with the hospital project team, that we will continue to look at that exact configuration, the exact point of connection with Westmoreland, how that is aligned to really make sure it certainly works and maximizes safety, facilitates traffic movements, and also minimizes any impact. And to document that a little bit clearer, I would offer a suggestion that under recommended action number 1, there is a condition B that speaks to review of final engineering, assuring safe intersection alignments, unobstructed sight lines. But perhaps you want to add language there that says something to the fact, at the end of that, something to the effect that, and specifically efforts are made to minimize, to mitigate any headlight impact on Lake Forest colleges to the north. If you choose to do that, you could certainly give us that specific direction, although I am confident that we would undertake those efforts either way. So that concludes my comments, and if you'd like, it might be helpful to have Mr. Schumacher talk a little bit about that, the 75-foot area and how that berm will be removed, enhanced, planted, or whatever.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, I think there's a bit of a misreading. We are intending to leave the berm there. We're simply, actually, let me get to a better image. We're going to leave in place what is there today. In fact, we're going to go back in on some of those berms and enhance them a bit. We're doing some additional planting. So that will all remain. We're not removing anything that isn't there already. We are cutting a road through, that's true. So that will break it there. But as we've talked about before, we're purposely putting in additional planting. We're curving the road so there's not a straight shot of headlights shining forward to Westmoreland, trying to break that up, except at the exact intersection there. So we're doing everything possible. We're sensitive to those issues about the landscape, and we're also sensitive to the headlight issue that has been brought up before. So that's what we're intending on doing.
May I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Schumacher, what is the current height of the berms there, roughly?
Maybe, Tom, you can...
North side or south side?
South side.
10 to 15 feet.
And when you say enhance or make some
About
enhancements?
reshaping them and making sure that they do the best job possible.
But you're
in
not going
shielding.
to increase the height?
That's not the plan as far as I know. You might, okay. There's the possibility.
Here in the...
There's a possibility, but no exact plans at the moment.
All right. And could somebody just refresh me, maybe Augie, what is the berming like on the north side of Westmoreland?
The north side, I believe, is about 8 feet, but it has a lot of plantings on it, including
It's,
pine. Go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry, Augie. I mean, that's the cross-section through there. It's that kind of cross-section
Right.
that exists today.
Am I mistaken? Did you show a slide that pictured the intersection of the connector with Westmoreland?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there it is.
There it was. You went by it.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah,
You're talking about, the actual photograph, yes. So that post that you see there with the flag on it, that's the center of the roadway as it meets Westmoreland,
The connector road.
that connector road, okay? So you're looking at the berm that is currently on the north side of Westmoreland, plus the tree cover.
Are most of those, if not all, evergreen trees?
Many of them are.
But not all.
I can't say, now, some of them are not, but certainly
Okay.
a lot of them in the foreground are.
That's
And
true.
you can see that the berm up here is more 6.9 foot berm from the curb. So you've got a berm plus the planting on that north side.
is there, Augie or Mr. Schumacher, is there an opportunity to enhance the evergreen screening on the north side?
I don't, is that? I mean, we're not touching it.
Yeah.
It's not even your property, is it, Tom? It's not even on our property.
Commissioner
I-
Culbertson,
I get that.
I could certainly offer that. I think as this road takes shape, it's something we would certainly look at. And if if due to the alignment of the road, there's a gap on that berm somewhere, we would certainly work with the hospital to do an infill planting with the approval of Presbyterian Homes.
That's where I was going.
Okay, very good. Okay. So we've had, Kathy, did you want to say anything more as far as staff? Okay, very good. Petitioner, would you like to make any further rebuttal or comments on what you've heard?
Mr. Chairman, no, I really would just like to reinforce that that we believe we have a spectacular plan, and we recognize the comments. In fact, I know many of the people in the room, we've worked collaboratively in advancing this plan, and I think that we can't lose vision of, it's certainly been focused this evening on the hospital, but it's what happens inside this institution that impacts everyone's lives so internally. I think that it has to be recognized that we've been here for 115 years, serving the community. And this beautiful facility at a time when, quite frankly, healthcare reform is going to change the face of hospitals across the country, and many hospitals may not exist. The investment that Northwestern is making in our community is spectacular. I think that the plan reflects the priorities of our community, the values of our community, the amount of open space, the responsiveness to the initial concerns, and just the spirit that we've worked with. Everybody has been completely aligned, I think, in creating an institution that will be spectacular in every respect, technically, aesthetically, functionally, from a quality standpoint, which at the end of the day is important to us, but it's also important for generations to come. Today, I was in the hospital walking through, and I interacted with a cardiothoracic surgeon, and a patient in our community ended up having a significant heart attack. Luckily, because of the immediate response, we were able to get the patient into the hospital on life support, and we're able to restore that individual, a younger person with a family. That could be anybody else in this room. And I could tell you that the hospital we have today, as I've mentioned in the past, is at the end of its life. So the key for us has been, how do we advance a hospital that fits with the Northwestern standard of medicine, which, by the way, is the top in the world, and fit it within the context of our community, and make certain that that it is positioned for us for the next 75 or 115 years. And I believe that's what we have in front of us. But what's important also to recognize is that we've been working on this for some time. We think we have a plan that recognizes the challenges, because one thing we know is that even with 160 acres, there's a neighbor. And the challenge for us is, how do we respond with a facility that is capable of meeting the needs of the institution and the mission that we have, but do it in a way that is not so compromised. In fact, I would say that it's due to the vision of the trustees that acquired the land that was designated and specifically slated for the future of healthcare to advance our healing mission, is precisely why we have the opportunity to advance a project of this significance today. It's really wonderful to see that being realized. And that's why we are so confident that it's important that we don't get unduly constrained with limitations on the site, so that we are flexible in meeting the needs of the next generation, and that my subsequent the CEO, 50 years will not be cursing me as he looks to advance the hospital of the future. So with that, thank you very much for your patience and your support throughout this process. Thank you, everyone in this audience and in the community that's participated in this process. We think it's a spectacular facility. We think it will change the face of healthcare that's delivered today and into the future. And we also feel it will be, once again, a beautiful cornerstone to our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Come next to final questions from commissioners to either the petitioner or staff.
I have something.
Go ahead.
More of a statement, Commissioner Lay, and that is simply that, maybe to put in perspective, the Plan Commission is an intermediate step in the whole process. And the fact that there's still staff details that need to be worked out, such as the intersection of where the roads connect. There is continuance of the advisory committee in very focused areas of expertise. There's a city council that needs to be taken into account and approved. After that, there's design drawings, there's a building permit. So there's multiple more steps. And I just feel that after 26 months of planning, 11 months of detailed design, the hospital, as I quoted those numbers versus the master plan a while ago, you can see that they've designed the building not simply to slide in under the minimums or maximums that were required by the master plan, but they far exceeded what the master plan has called for in just about every measurable way. And I think after this time, we owe the hospital a vote and, in my opinion, an approval to keep going. As Mr. Swarthout said, there is a business behind this as well that we have to recognize. And waiting another month, another 2 months to design a particular intersection would not be doing the process justice, in my opinion. So I wanted to make that statement before we move forward.
Okay. If there are no further questions of petitioner or staff, we can move right then into
Deliberation,
which
I'd be happy to initiate, if I could. As I said before, I really haven't been involved with this process other than the last meeting. And I have to say that the product that we're being presented with is just absolutely spectacular. It's really a masterpiece. And I know there's been a lot of concerns about addressing the needs of a lot of different constituencies and so forth, and it probably hasn't been vocalized what a wonderful piece of thinking and artful design this is. I'm a designer myself, and from the very conceptual, abstract notion of this plan as kind of an embryo on a small prairie with a water feature, I mean, it just does everything so marvelously. I'm sure you're going to be bestowed with many different types of design awards for this. The professionals and even the lay people are going to be extremely happy with this. It's almost more like a resort than a hospital. I've been in and around hospitals a great deal the last 20 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this, and I'm sure I will when I get older. And but I have to say, even your parking has a beauty to it. I mean, it's just so well conceived and resolved, and you still are maintaining such a high degree of patience with everyone's input and feedback. I have to say I'm really proud of everybody involved in this process, and I'm glad that I got a chance to be on board for the last part of it. I think there might be a few areas that could be discussed as we proceed, but I see no reason why we need to stop the process from going on, and not because we feel that we have to do this by extortion. We don't do anything because of that, and if anything, we want to encourage you to continue on the trajectory that you're following. I think it might be, if I can maybe summarize, I think that maybe our biggest task tonight is to form the motion for approval, but I'll let other people deliberate.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that the Plan Commission endorse the Hospital Advisory Committee's recommendations as outlined in their report. There are 4 of them, and to recommendation number 1, we were going to add something. We were thinking about adding.
Yeah, to B, something at the end of B that would read, specific efforts to mitigate any headlight effects on Lake Forest Place to the north shall be made. Is that acceptable?
So incorporated.
Okay. Any objection? Seeing none, that is added to recommendation 1B. Okay?
So I'd look for a second.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seeing a second to the motion, any further discussion on the motion? Are you ready for the vote? Okay, all those in favor of adoption of the recommendations and forwarding them to the city council as amended, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Thank you all for attending, and to those who are concerned about that connector road, I would just reiterate what Commissioner Ziccarelli said. There
not done.
is still sensitivity to what you're saying, and I'm expecting that they'll be factored into the final decision. Okay, next item to come before us is public. Any public testimony on any non-agenda items?
Mr. Chairman, the only remaining item is approval of the 2014 meeting calendar. All of those meeting dates are true to your normal second Wednesday of the month meeting. And if that's acceptable, a motion, a second, and approval of that meeting calendar would allow us to get it on the website.
I missed it totally.
The schedule.
We have the schedule, meeting schedule, and it's the second Wednesday of each month. So, let me ask, is there objection to going with this?
No.
Okay.
No.
Seeing no objection is so ordered.
September 10th is my wife's birthday.
We'll move the meeting.
Let's move for.
How are you doing?
We'll come up. You want to adjourn and we can go.
Okay, seeing our business concluded, the meeting is hereby adjourned.